Hello and welcome back to the Armchair QBs. We are done with Super Wildcard Weekend and we're ready for Dirty Divisional Weekend, Dan.
Now, I called it Dirty Divisional Weekend last week, but is that an official title or is that just what we're calling it?
I think that's just what we're going to call it, and by God, we will make this happen.
We are influencers, trendsetters.
Yeah, exactly. We're people about the biz. I think we should start though with a shock firing, in my opinion. I'll say why I think it was a shock. First of all, Doug Pederson's gone from the Eagles. We did mention him as a possible candidate for Black Monday in our Week 17 preview. But after Week 17 and what they did with that intentional tanking, I thought he was safe because there was no way he did that without the knowledge of the others involved.
Or so they say.
Or so they say. But now some of the reporting around it, I know from Ian Rappaport from NFL Network, he's kind of saying he's
the worst of all the insiders. I need to get that out there. He is the worst of all the insiders. But anyway,
he's the most hated by all the other insiders as well.
Yeah, he's got no pals. Anyway.
But he seemed to indicate that, and Albert Breer kind of validated it as well. It was more of I'm jumping, but I'm also being pushed. Like, he didn't want to hire new staff. I don't know. This is all just very weird.
Yeah, so it's not a mutual parting of the ways. It was essentially, he tried to say, this is what I want, and Jeffrey Lurie has said, thanks, but no thanks. It's time for us to go our separate ways, and so we're going to fire you. Lurie, when questioned about it, came out with all these kind of, great answers that he's going to be inducted to the Eagles Hall of Fame, and he's going to get a job in the next week, no doubt about it. It was just time for them to go in a different direction. This all comes down to the way that the Eagles, and with Pederson's leadership, set up this year, and how it all just fell apart. And it's very, very strange that a week after the season ends, this is when they do it. So the timing is the first bit of interest to me. Then it's all about the words that are being said about why they're doing it now and such the like. And I think that they're all so tied up in what happened in week 17 that if anybody ever told the truth, Philly fans would go fucking ballistic. The league would go fucking ballistic, and it would just kill Roseman, Lurie, and Pederson, and they would become toxic for any schedule. So it's all in their interest to say, no, we had nothing to do with that week 17, atrocity.
But I think it's almost like Doug's got them over a barrel here, because he can blow this shit up completely just by going rogue and saying, well, they told me that I had to lose week 17.
Yeah, but I mean,
it fuck them over completely. Now, he wouldn't get hired by another NFL owner because they're all in cahoots. It doesn't matter what anybody says. All those owners talk, and they all come with the same opinion. So he wouldn't step out on that, but he could potentially get them over a barrel. And I think that's, to your point, why there's so many nice things being said about him.
Whenever this happens, all of a sudden you have the leaks and sources close to and bits and pieces. And the main thing that seemed to be coming out after the news broke and people were trying to find out what Pederson thought of it was that Pederson himself was fed up of basically having to do what someone else told him to. And that was the wording of it. He was fed up of being told what to do. And that just screams, again, another power struggle within the Philadelphia Eagles. And we've seen it kind of two coaches in a row now. And Howie Roseman seems to live a charmed life. And he got a lot of credit for when he came back in after the Chip Kelly era and rebuilt the team that allowed them to go to the Super Bowl. But again, since they've, been in the Super Bowl, they're below 500. This year was just an absolute clusterfuck. Their first round pick, Jalen Reagor, has been a fucking damp squib, and they could have had Justin Jefferson. Their second and third round picks haven't been, any good either. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, again, from last time, hasn't been good. So they've kind of, really, really struggled in the personnel game since the Super Bowl, and they've struggled on the field. And this season, it was all about how many different kind of, offensive coaching minds he brought into that Pederson brought in. And when you're looking back on it now, even though it's kind of, a day after Pederson was fired, it just seems as though the dysfunction's there and it's clear to see. And it's very, sometimes we kind of, don't want to see it. I don't know what it is, but when you actually break it down and you look at everything and you look at the effect that it had on the team, it just becomes very, very clear that maybe this kind of divorce is better to happen now than to try and get through another off season, and for it to happen, 3 games into the 2021 season. So it might work out for everybody involved, but now there's the horrendous idea that some team's going to get Doug Pederson as their head coach.
Possibly the Jets.
Yeah, I don't know. The Eagles got rid of Andy Reid, and then he's gone on to 7 great years in Kansas City, and has managed to get the kind of the new superstar quarterback that's going to basically keep him in a job until he retires. I don't think that's what is in the future of Doug Pederson.
I think we all know that the person that was pulling the strings behind that Super Bowl winning Eagles team was Frank Reich.
Yeah. I've been saying that for 2 years, and it's more and more clear that and it was. I think we discussed it early part of the season that's what everybody would start putting together, and that's what's happened. And to be honest, it's been said since Reich had that. Since Reich took over in Indy, it's been said. So,
Dan, I have long told you that your prediction for NFL is unmatched, and it's just so happened that you've never had a podcast before to put forth these ideas. And I think the listeners have all found this year that most of your predictions have all come right.
Well,
don't doubt Dan.
Well,
that's the message.
That's too much. But I certainly, when I get things right, I fucking want to make sure people know it. Because it seems as though if I get one thing wrong, I get absolutely slated for it. So we'll just see. Anyway.
Right. Speaking of dysfunction, before we move on to the wild card,
Houston Texans.
Fuck me, this has been a painful couple of days.
It's getting talked about a little bit too much now for it just to be a kind of throwaway comment or a throwaway idea that Watson might be traded.
So, how not to run a franchise? Cal McNair. Deshaun Watson did not ask to be brought on to this process of selecting the GM or selecting the coach.
Well, is that right?
Yeah, that is everything that has come out and from a lot of sources. Like him and JJ Watt did not ask to be brought into this process. Cal McNair brought them on. Now, the most vocal about all of this is Deshaun. JJ's kind of gone a bit quiet on this, but apparently he's pissed off as well because he's not consulted, but he knows that he can just be released, so it's not as big a deal for him. There's no guaranteed money left on his deal. You bring him in, you don't even listen to him. You don't listen to the consultancy firm. It seems like Easterby's there to stay, and there's still many days left until anything can be done, and we can see what happens if there even is a trade for Deshaun Watson. But I've set my stall out. If Deshaun's traded away, I'm done with the Texans. I'm taking my talent somewhere else. I'm eyeing the Bills. I quite like that uniform. I like the blue. I like the red. I like the white. It speaks to me. I'm just putting them on notice. I'm ready to go.
There are teams with quarterback needy positions that have the capital to be able to do it. I've taunted you about it. It would surprise me if it did happen, because the only redeeming feature about that franchise right now is Deshaun Watson. And the idea that you would hire a head coach and then the GM would then trade away because he's got final say on the 53 or he's got final say on personnel matters. I mean, the head coach would just instantly resign. I mean, it's the only way to get a head coach of your choosing is that the head coach will say, "I want a guarantee that Deshaun Watson is staying."
I don't know how much power he has. Realistically, can he withhold his services until he gets traded?
Well,
yes.
But for millions, for hefty fines every day that he's missing. Now the new CBA's kicked in. I mean, holdouts are going to become rarer and rarer and rarer because of the because of the financial penalties now that are inflicted on players. I mean, the Le'Veon Bell holdout could not have happened with the new CBA, and that's the one that's went the longest in the most recent times, essentially a whole season. So, well, until he reported, and then they just didn't play him so that he could get the accrued year. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So no, but I mean, they finally have interviewed Eric Bieniemy, or they've certainly asked to interview Eric Bieniemy. Why it took them this long to think, what, maybe we should probably speak to him, I don't know. But maybe maybe behind the scenes, that's what Deshaun Watson's saying. Look, you don't want me to continually ask for a trade and get all these quotes out, or not stop the rampant rumor mill of the fact that I want to be traded. Go interview Eric Bieniemy, because he hadn't done it so far, and I think it's well known that I think that's who Deshaun Watson wants. Is that not right?
Yeah, I think Bieniemy is the one that Watson wants, and it's. I don't think Bieniemy, but if you're Bieniemy, why would you take it? You're clearly not even first choice. Well, it's clear that ownership don't want you.
No, and I think that's absolutely right. That's why when we talked about it last week, we kind of went through all the people that the Texans were kind of talking to, and it was a surprise that Bieniemy wasn't part of their initial go round, which is again, we've got ideas as to why that he might not be appealing to certain franchises, or why he might not be getting head coaching gigs, but he's still probably number one. Should have been potentially got a job last season. He should be getting one this season, but he obviously wasn't on the Houston Texans initial list. Now, as we saw with the GM search, whether that means anything or not, we don't know. We don't know who's actually running, who's going to make that decision, who's going to make that recommendation, and who's going to pull the trigger on the actual hiring. So there are better franchises than the Houston Texans just now.
Yes, there are. Shall we talk about them?
We'll certainly disagree about them, I think, is what we're going to do.
Yeah, for a change.
Mm-hmm. In a civilized manner.
Yes. Civilized discourse. Mm-hmm. Let's start with, we'll do it in order, shall we?
As is the custom.
Yes. We start in Buffalo, where the mighty Buffalo Bills defeated the Indianapolis Colts 27-24.
Escaped the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, they let the Colts get back in it. I will say that.
I don't even say let the Colts get back in it. I think this was a really, really strange game for me, because I think it pretty much all turns around Philip Rivers, and I've kind of gone back and forth about who I really wanted to blame for this loss to the Colts, because I think the Bills were there for the taking, and I think if the Colts had a little bit more dynamism at the quarterback position, I think they would have had them. And I think Philip Rivers, I came into the season a big proponent of the Colts. I said AFC Championship game, experienced quarterback was just what they needed. And the Colts in the last 5-6 weeks of the season were the Colts that I kind of envisaged. And it just came one step, too far. And I don't think this is a good Bills defense by any offense, but I think the Colts are the only team in the playoff era since the NFL began in the playoffs to be over 470 yards with no turnovers and lose. All the other teams were 11-0 who went over 470 yards and no turnovers, and the Colts were the first team to lose. Now, they lost that themselves, quite frankly, because I think what I was getting at was the last drive of the first half and their first drive of the second half is essentially where this game was lost, because they turned the ball over on downs and at the 4-yard line of Buffalo, and they could have easily kicked a field goal, and that was 3 points that could end up being the difference. But to be fair to Buffalo, they went 96 yards back in the other direction and scored a touchdown right before halftime. And then immediately afterwards, their first drive in the second half, they miss a field goal, and there's your missed kind of 6 points. And that really was the difference in this game, because the Bills weren't exceptional. They did well, but I don't think they were kind of, the Buffalo Bills that everybody was eulogizing about.
No, I think that's fair. I'm a little bit higher on the Bills. I like this game because I thought there was a lot of pressure on the Bills just because of all the history. They've not won a playoff game since December 30th, 1995.
That's their fault.
Yeah, I know that's their fault, but there can be a lot of outside pressure on them as well. And when you start the game, you go down, you think they're not exactly playing great, or this could be the start of the wheels coming off. There's always an upset in Wildcard Weekend, and there's the potential that this could have been it. But to be fair to them, they just ground it out and they did what needed to be done to win. Yeah.
I just think that this is an example of how the Bills will fall down. I'm not confident of them after this game whatsoever. I think the Colts should have had this game, and the Bills' performance was underwhelming, quite frankly.
It wasn't their best performance all year. I will give you that, and I don't think anyone can really argue it. But you did see the flashes of what makes the Bills so dangerous. The way that they were able to just march down the field and score so quickly, before the half. I was talking about it in another group text with some of the guys that we've played football with. And I said that as they were doing it, the Bills have the chance to win the middle eight there. And it just came out in the second half. They ended up getting a field goal instead of a touchdown. But if they scored the touchdown there, I don't think the Colts even bring this back as close as it was.
No. I suppose what you could say about the Bills' first half performance is that they had 5 drives. 3 of them were 3 and outs, and 2 of them were 8+ plays for touchdowns, going 85 and 96 yards. So Indianapolis can take that on them as much as they want, but it was really kind of they not even a bend don't break for 3 of the first 5 drives. They were excellent, and on the other 2 they completely and utterly allowed Buffalo to march on them, which I suppose is what the Bills can do and what we would be surprised for them to do. But I just thought that they were just a little bit slow to come out of the gate, and then in the second half, to be fair, they only had the ball 4 times and they scored on 3 of those 4. So maybe I'm being a little bit biased about my feelings towards the 2 organizations and the way that they're playing football just now. But I coming on to the Bills' next opponents, I think if they play like they did against the Colts, they're going to have their asses handed to them.
I do think as well that we have to remember the Colts are a good defense.
No, I'm not disagreeing, but I mean they're going to be playing just as good a defense next week.
Philip Rivers potentially his last ever game.
I think it should be. I think it should be. It's sad for him that he didn't ever get to a Super Bowl, but I think it's time.
Would you put him in the Hall of Fame?
Not first ballot, and it would have to see. But I think certainly his body of work is good enough for it. But whether or not he, we're not talking about the Hall of Very Good. We're talking about the Hall of, the Hall of Fame. I think he will get it. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a wait for him.
I put him into the category of Hall of Very Good.
Yeah.
I just don't. I think they let anybody into the Hall of Fame now. It's gotten way too diluted. But I just think that, in my opinion, I think he's a great player from this era, but he's just not an elite player. He's not a Hall of Famer.
And you know what, I couldn't really kind of disagree with you, too much on that. But I think what we're kind of, what we sometimes are detached from is how one player affects a whole franchise and affects the whole discussion about a team from a league perspective, and how teams are viewed. And I think that when Rivers was drafted by the Giants and then traded to the Chargers as part of that Eli Manning swap, that draft in itself is something that can be talked about for hours on end. But how Rivers then went and basically took over that terrible, terrible San Diego team and made them into a playoff contender, for I don't have it off the top of my head, but the majority of the years that he was there, it was just he was always a bridesmaid. Never just quite got there. AFC Championship game, I think against the Pats was the closest that he got. I think he might have done that on a torn ACL.
Yeah, it was.
But I think, what was it, 14, 15 years now he's been in the league, and his body of work is good enough. But he didn't win an AFC Championship game. He didn't win a Super Bowl. And I think that means that he will always be behind people that have a similar body of work, maybe not as good, but have won honours. I think that's really what's going to be the difference. So I don't think he's first ballot. I think he will be maybe in 10 years, but certainly not in 5 years when he's first eligible.
Let's move on to the middle game from Saturday. The Los Angeles Rams against the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams win this 30-20. This was an interesting game.
Vomit.
Yeah. Russell Wilson was god awful. I can't even think of a nice way to
11 completions. 11 completions.
I had said I had put money on him to lose to be under 250 yards for the game. I didn't think it would be because he was awful. I just thought it would be because it would be one of those tight games. He just did not appear at all.
No, but the main reason to that was Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald won this game pretty much for the Los Angeles Rams. I'm not talking about, the interception by Russell Wilson or anything like that, but if you just look how disruptive he was and took over, the whole of the game in the first half, it was really, really astonishing. I mean, because we watch Red Zone nowadays, we don't, necessarily maybe kind of, focus on it. Rams fans, if they watch the whole games, will be well aware of it. And we've seen the highlights, we watch it. But sometimes when you actually have to sit down and watch a Rams game and you see Aaron Donald in the form that he was in that first half and kind of, halfway through the third before he got hurt, it's just incredible. It's what I think when people talk about watching Reggie Miller play, what they must have experienced, what we're doing now by watching Aaron Donald. And if he plays like this for the rest of his career, I will not be surprised if he wins Defensive Player of the Year every single year because he deserves it. The idea that, he did get it this year, didn't he? Or it hasn't been decided, has it?
It's not been decided yet. We have to wait for the NFL honors.
Yeah, well, the idea that TJ Watt is going to get over Aaron Donald is just ridiculous because TJ Watt's had a fine season, very good. He's up there now as one of the top tier defenders in the league, but he's nowhere near Aaron Donald. And just year in, year out, the consistency of what he's doing is just incredible. So that was, good for me to finally sit down and watch a Rams game. And, because the Rams games always seem to be on at fucking 1 a.m. And I just go, yeah, okay, I'll just catch it up on Game Pass later on. But actually sitting down and watching this game throughout, it was a real pleasure to watch Aaron Donald go to work and just absolutely destroy this Seattle Seahawks offensive line.
Yeah, and hopefully he's actually fit for this weekend as well. Him going down was a bit of an issue. We talked about this in the preview. We said that we thought that if Goff played badly, at least they could put in Warford and they would Walford, and then I had more confidence in him. Walford starts, he gets injured, and Jared Goff comes in instead. He didn't do well. He completed 9 of 19 for 155 yards. But at the same time, he was playing with a pin in his thumb. So there's reasons for the poor play.
You could see it on the telecast, if that's an American way to talk about it. But you could actually see that he was actually feeling his thumb, and his thumb on his throwing hand did look. It looked like a kind of Richmond sausage. It didn't look how a thumb was supposed to look. So that's probably why he wasn't starting in the first place. But they came in, they just got the better of the Seahawks on the ground and absolutely churned it out. And when we were talking about the draft, about some players that we might want to pick up, I said Cam Akers and KJ Hill. Now KJ Hill's done absolutely nothing. To be fair, he's not really got the opportunity. I can't really say anything else about that. But Cam Akers in the last 5-6 weeks of the season has actually looked as though he could do something. And he was very, very similar to Jonathan Taylor of the Colts. Started the season and looked as though it was just a lost pick. Wasn't doing anything at all. They were having to ride Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson. But in the last in the last couple of games, Cam Akers has really come to the fore as the running back that they're going to ride throughout the playoffs. And I think he showed in this game why he was taken in the second round. I know we always talk about how you can get value of running backs anywhere, but I think he is somebody that is really, really going to push on for them and be their starting tailback next year. And that's how the Rams really got through this. Jalen Ramsey shutting down DK Metcalf always helps. So the Seattle Seahawks are going to have to really, really think about how they build as a team in the off-season. And they've just extended John Schneider because he was getting kind of, chat about going to the Lions. But they're going to have to fix their offensive line, and they're going to have to think, how do we not allow DK Metcalf to get basically taken out of the game by Jalen Ramsey. And I would often think that would mean some new thinking and perhaps getting rid of Brian Schottenheimer. But nope, they're going to keep Brian Schottenheimer as well. So I think Seahawks fans might be in for a little bit of a painful off-season.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the issue around the offensive line has been one that has plagued the Seahawks going back numerous years.
And it can't all be blamed on Tom Cable.
And no, it can't all be blamed on Tom Cable.
He's not there anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, it was going back to the Tom Cable days, and they've still not fixed it. I don't know. This was a team that I thought earlier on had real Super Bowl aspirations, and I don't think Schottenheimer is the right guy. I think he only does what he's told by Pete Carroll, and that's why he's there.
It does seem strange that he's got no real kind of, but I mean, Darrell Bevel was almost the same. He just was quite happy to stay at that level, and now he's off to the Lions. Maybe there was a link there, I don't know, but it just feels to me that the Seahawks are a bit stagnant at the moment, and they could do with an injection of, some conflict rather than everybody being best pals and working together to try and sort out a problem. Maybe they need somebody just to come in with a different idea, or ruffle some feather. I don't know, but they've had Pete Carroll, they've had John Schneider, they've had Brian Schottenheimer there, I think, for the last four years, and Schneider and Carroll before that, obviously. And it just seems as though that Russell Wilson, if Russell Wilson wasn't there, can you really imagine what type of team the Seahawks would be?
They would not be good.
How are they going to sustain the Seahawks that we saw in the first 6 weeks of the season? Going forward, I really don't have an answer to that right now. So we'll have to wait and see. But certainly, I think that it's going to be interesting to see what moves the Seahawks make, because obviously they don't have a first-round pick this year coming up, and free agency is a bit slim, and there's going to be less money about. So maybe that's why they're keeping the stability, just because everything, they're not going to be able to bring in the first-round pick, even though they often trade out and they value the middle rounds a lot more. But yeah, Seahawks are a strange one, given the way they finished the season and the way they played in this game. I think it's going to be so, Seahawks Twitter at the best of time is a pretty down place about everybody that's involved with the Seattle Seahawks, from head coaches to GMs to that sort of thing. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Let's move on. Tampa Bay took on the Washington football team. Tampa Bay won this one 31-23. Thoughts on this one, Dan?
I managed to stay with it till halftime, and then I had to give up on it. But Taylor Heineke is really what I want to talk about more than anything else.
His MAGA tweets, or
no?
Are we ignoring that?
No, we're ignoring that. We're a football centered podcast, Calum, and you can make any sort of insinuations that you want. But about 5 years ago, I think it was 5 years ago, Taylor Heineke had about the best preseason of any backup quarterback that I remember for the Vikings. And I'm quite strange about the preseason. I almost kind of, prefer it sometimes, because it's a really, really good time to see all these kind of, potential players come in and do it. And he had an absolute storming preseason for the Vikings. And then he's basically followed Scott Turner everywhere, from the Vikings down to Carolina, and now he was, being drafted back in, dragooned back into Washington. And I think the game that he had here, against the Bucs is going to get him a job, certainly for next season, because he obviously was only signed to the rest of the season after he was brought in. But he's going to end up on a roster somewhere, because the idea that you could have someone like Taylor Heineke come in and be this solid and play this well against supposedly good Bucs defense, who are kind of top 5 in yards and points, I think it was a really, really impressive showing. And given that obviously Washington were kind of going to struggle in the first place, the idea that this was an 8-point game and ended up being an 8-point game, just it's one of these ones where I thought that Taylor Heineke gave them more of a shot to win the game than I expected, and it was interesting to see him play.
Yeah, I don't know how much weight I want to put into it, given the fact that, Tampa were not practicing for Taylor Heineke. They were practicing for Alex Smith. So, you sometimes get this with backups when they go in. They have these amazing games, and then people get film on them and are able to actually game plan for them, and it all falls apart. So I'm holding off on the Heineke hype train.
No. Did you not hear what I said? I said he's going to get a backup job. He's earned himself, ridiculous millions and millions of dollars off of the back of one game when he was out of the league essentially for, 90% of the league this year. And it's just, I like that type of story.
No, I agree with you, but there was a lot of people on Twitter that were going a bit overboard with the Heineke hype, and I just want to pump their brakes on that a little bit.
That all my burner accounts.
Yeah, it was. I could tell. And so
bad spelling and bad grammar.
Well, no, those are more likely to be mine. I just think that there were reasons why he did well. If we pivot onto Tampa, since the Washington football team are out of this, and to be honest, they were just happy to be there, given how they got in from the NFC least. Way shots fired, pow pow. What do we think of Tampa now after this game?
Not much, to be honest. I suppose kind of running on that front, that vaunted Washington front was okay, but then again, Chase Young kind of got a little bit injured and didn't really do much anyway when he even was in there. But still, that Washington front is difficult to run on, and yet Leonard Fournette managed to run for 93 yards, which I think is his second highest total in about the last 2 seasons or whatever. So the fact that they somehow found a running game when they haven't had a running game at all, it was interesting to me. But I don't know. I think you say it's difficult to be able to evaluate Taylor Heineke on this because the fact that the Bucs didn't really, know that who's going to be playing, who they're going to prepare for. I still think that perhaps I'm really not trying to be too down about a lot of teams, but I just wanted to see something a little bit more from the Bucs. But when they got up, I had no doubt that meant that they were going to win this game. But I think talking about the Bucs next game is probably going to be more interesting than what we can take from this game.
Yeah, I left this game feeling a little bit meh about the Bucs. I thought they did well because I thought the defensive front would give them a little bit of issue, but they did seem to handle it pretty well. They weren't really going to get challenged by this offense too much, and yeah, there were some splash plays. They gave up 23 points, but I'm just it's left me a little bit in limbo about them. And I think this matchup that they've got up against New Orleans, it's two teams that I have no clue about coming out of this this weekend.
I mean, you have to remember that. I mean, I've said that once they got up, I didn't really kind of feel as though they were ever going to lose it. I mean, it was 18-16 at the end of the third. So, I mean, the gap might be over a touchdown, but they left it a little bit late to kind of solidify that win. So, I don't know. I think that we're kind of moving on to what we're talking about, the predictions next week, but I think the Bucs are going to have to work really, 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 really hard in New Orleans next week to stay with them.
Let's segue into New Orleans. New Orleans took on...
If anything, this game was worse.
Yes. New Orleans took on the Chicago Bears. New Orleans win 21-9. Nobody cares about this. The real story is we can kill the Mahomes, Trubisky, Watson narrative. Mitchell Trubisky was the MVP. How many times has Mahomes won MVP? None. Watson? None. That right there validates the pick.
Sorry. Mahomes has won MVP.
No, he's won MVP. He's not won NVP.
Hang on a minute. Is this some sort of Nickelodeon shite?
Yeah, the Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player Award.
I don't know. I don't know if I really fell for that, but God, all right, okay, fine, okay.
As happens when somebody tries to do something nice in the world, like Nickelodeon, they wanted to have a nice award for the game. Twitter and the internet take over, and because it was a public vote decided by the votes of the people, adults took it over and voted for Mitch Trubisky to win it, so that they completely ruined the ceremony. But it is now on Mitch Trubisky's Pro Football Reference page. He's down as an MVP winner.
This is just participation fucking trophy culture, isn't it? Everyone gets a trophy.
Well, no, they actually ruined it as well, because what was supposed to happen was that the winner of the MVP ideally would have gone to the winner, and they, like someone on the winning team, and they were going to get slimed as part of it. So in the end, they didn't go through with that because nobody from the Bears wanted to come out to collect it. And in the end, Sean Payton decided that he would just get slimed after the game. So you ruined it for the kids, people of the internet. You ruined it for the kids.
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah. The game itself, Drew Brees, we've talked about this before, about these empty stat lines, these empty box scores. Drew Brees did not look good. Am I wrong?
No, he just didn't look like Drew Brees of old. I don't know what it looks like, but I imagine, after 40 years of marriage, you look at, you might perhaps look at your wife and think, what, you're not as, you don't look as, like you did 20 years ago. And that's what we're having right now with Brees. We're looking through those type of glasses.
I just think they're going to really struggle in the playoffs because, okay, they were able to get past the Bears here, but certainly this week against the Bucs, if you can't push the ball downfield, what the hell are you going to do? Like he's actually attempted fewer passes downfield than Cam Newton this year, by over 20 yards.
Yeah, but that's because
they're so one-dimensional now in the passing attack.
I don't know if you can say that, but efficient short football is not what people want to see, and it's not what people associate with winning. But I mean, New Orleans aren't 12-4 by mistake. Okay, they had that 2-3 game spell where Brees was out because of the ribs. Well, it was 3, I think. And if you come back in, and from the very beginning of the season to now, he's not the Drew Brees that we remember. And we've continually said, "Oh, it's terrible, it's awful." But actually, when you've got a high-level player who, yes, the arm isn't what it used to be before, executing these matters and not turning the ball over, and that's the main qualifier, not turning the ball over. You've got dynamism from Alvin Kamara, 1-2 punch with Latavius Murray, and you've got a defense which can keep you in games. And I'm not saying they're the most well-rounded team in the playoffs, but they're well-rounded enough that Brees doesn't have to be that, launching down the seam for 25 yards that we're used to seeing kind of, 2-3 years ago, and still playing at my own team. So, yeah, it's just an aged version of something we used to love, and it's just, we're a little bit sad that it's aged and doesn't look like quite how it used to. But again, that doesn't mean that we don't like it any less. I've really kind of struggled with that fucking metaphor, but
you have, but I've enjoyed your struggle. And it's clear that you're not married, because the correct answer is your wife does not look the same as 40 years ago. She looks more beautiful from that time.
Yeah, you don't understand. I'm in a scandal Scott relationship here. Unfortunately, it's brutal honesty at every turn.
I suppose the one point for the Saints going forward is that you do have Michael Thomas back healthy, and we saw the stat during the broadcast. This is the first time on Super Wildcard Weekend that Brees, Kamara, and Thomas had all been together at the same time in pretty much over a year. So Yeah, I suppose they are getting healthier on offense at the right time. I don't know. I was just very underwhelmed by this whole performance from the Saints.
I think one thing is clear is that they're anticipating Michael Thomas getting a lot of attention. And that's why Deontay Harris ended up being the leading receiver. I mean, halfway through the first half, he had, I think it was targeted 4 times, 4 catches, and 44 yards. Was the point that I kind of peaked and noticed that this is the way that they were going, and he's only had 20 receptions all year. So it was quite clear that they were trying to use the fact that there was going to get so much attention on Thomas to open up some of the receiving slots. And so listen, Sean Payton's got an answer for everything, and I trust him. I trust Breeze. I trust the talent that's around Breeze, and I trust the defense a little bit more every week. They were playing the Chicago Bears. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but they've played well enough in the 2 games against Tampa that mean that when we come on to talk about the Tampa game, I'd be quite happy taking the Saints to get to the national championship game. Sorry, the NFC championship game.
Okay, I realised that I've actually gone out of sequence here because I skipped over a game that happened on Sunday afternoon. Sunday evening for us.
Just the most important game.
Yes, I know. I don't know why I did that, but let me correct that now. Let us talk about them. I'm really happy that this team won. Baltimore 20, Tennessee Titans 13, and you can stick your Lamar Jackson doesn't win in the playoffs narrative down your fucking throat and choke on that and die and go away and never darken my fucking door again. Although Greasy fucking pissed me off in the broadcast when it was like, he's not won the big one yet.
Yeah, well,
he's 22 years old.
Yeah, Greasy's just fucking sour because he's 22 and he's already got an MVP in his pocket, and don't think Greasy ever had that. So
yeah. Sorry, he's 24 years old. He's still younger than Joe Burrow. Wait, just shut the fuck up, Greasy.
It didn't start off well, though. I was very, very worried. At 10 points, I was thinking this is exactly what we don't want to happen. It's what happened previously. History is just repeating itself. Deja vu. They're going to panic. It's all going to fucking fall apart. And then, slowly, methodically, they just managed to get it back together. And ground it out. And they didn't out Titans the Titans, but certainly the defense stood up and gave Tennessee the game that they should have given them the last 2 times they've played, going back to the regular season this year and the playoffs last year. I mean, that defense showed up and against a very, very good offensive team. And again, that's all you can ask for when it's your own team, but also any team that's in the playoffs, that we're not just kind of, Washington teams that are happy to be there, that you've got a team that's well-rounded and has the ability to play anybody in the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl and potentially win it. And Baltimore are. We might not be kind of, lauding their passing game, but I tell you what, every single team in the playoffs, if, they've said 2 teams that they want to play, I'm saying 2 because obviously the first one would be Kansas City. I'm pretty sure Baltimore would be, 5 out of 6 teams would say, we don't want to play Baltimore because they're going to beat you up on both sides of the ball and they're solid in special teams. And I just think there's, that win against the Titans is just going to galvanize them. And as I say, Buffalo were in trouble. Buffalo gave up a lot of yards on the ground to the Colts, and the Ravens are coming, and they're going to absolutely beat into submission. And I'm really, really looking forward to that game.
I think it's going to be a good game. Lamar only 179 yards passing. That didn't matter. That's not part of the game plan. He had the one awful pick. We're watching in the UK. Our broadcaster Sky had technical difficulties, so it actually didn't happen on my screen, so I choose to ignore it because I didn't witness it. So in my mind, he didn't throw an interception. He just had 179 yards. Some of his throws were absolutely brilliant.
Well, let's just go back to the regular trope throughout the season and what you have peddled out. And you have peddled it out. Even though I understand that you're a fan of Jackson, you have peddled it out yourself. What is the one trope that everybody says about Jackson, how to defend his passing game?
Make him throw it to the outside.
Yeah, and so that's exactly what Tennessee did. And Jackson, when given the opportunity, quite happily threw to the outside on a fucking line every single time. So, if that's how teams want to play Baltimore, then I think they're going to get a bit of a fright, because it's not a part of it's not as though Jackson can't do it. He can do it, and he's shown it in this game, and he will do it again. And if we can get teams to respect that a little bit more and open it up, then, as I say, everything else is going to work out. So it really is. I'm not saying it's pick your poison. It's not. I'm just saying, what do you want to try and force the Ravens to do? And I don't think there's an easy answer for. Certainly at this point in the season, I don't think there's an easy answer for anyone that wants to try and defend the Ravens' offense.
I think the issue, why I throw that trope out, is that was the one area I think that even you as a Jackson fan and Baltimore fan have to admit that was the one area that Jackson had to improve on, and his consistency in it. He can't do it. There's been times where he's not consistently hitting it at a level that you would expect. If he has made that improvement, which I think I've certainly been willing him to do, to kind of make his game more, so he does become a proper threat, then that's massive. Yeah. That's as big a thing for Jackson's improvement as Josh Allen's, shooting up 20 odd points in completion percentage.
Yeah, but it's more just about the threat. It's more just about the threat. And so now that the threat's there, again, I think it will change the way that, defenses maybe approach the Ravens towards, in these playoffs now. I'm presuming they get against Baltimore, so we'll see how the Bills decide to defend them. But, 236 on the ground, they they outran the Titans by almost like 4-1. Derrick Henry was held to 40 yards as lowest total on the ground since week 13 in 2018. I think was the stat that came out. So let's not so much focus so much on what the offense can do. I think the Baltimore defense is back healthy and executing, and so. The Ravens really are kind of set up really to kind of go against the Chiefs with their talent in the secondary and trying to get some pass rush. So they have really kind of built themselves to beat teams that pass the ball a little bit more. But the idea that they were able to be stout, physical, and totally dominate the line of scrimmage and be not scared of Derrick Henry and willing to go after him was really, really good to see. And it was very impressive to see them on the defense side of the ball do what they did. But I tell you what, not a lot of plays in this game. Tennessee only had 48 and Baltimore themselves only had 59. So it was very much kind of ground centric, run the clock. We'll have as few possessions as possible. We'll do better with our possessions than you do. And I tell you what, after that interception, I was delighted. Regardless of the stupid penalty, but you were witness. Why on earth were they throwing the ball after that interception when all they needed was a first down? And this is where analytics fuck everything up. Because knowing Baltimore, that they would have managed to somehow throw it away there. Because on the second play, what do? Just easily run it off for a fucking first down, and that's the end of it. So,
no, I think it was. It's a good win. I'm a bit more anxious on this game coming up, which we'll talk about in a bit more depth later on. But I'm just happy that Lamar's got his win, and I also like that Baltimore seem to hate Tennessee. I love that stomping on the logo. When Tennessee did it earlier in the season to Baltimore get them back. Let's bring the hate back. Let's bring it in.
I think it's a new style of rivalry. So we'll have to wait and see. But it goes more towards last playoffs and this year and the kind of the shenanigans that went off pre-game. So if that's a kind of way they want to go, I tell you what, Mike Vrabel wasn't happy. In fact, he seemed a bit of a pathetic figure in his press conference. So if they want to try and bring that and make it a regular thing, all power to them. But I certainly think that currently we'll take the bragging rights for this year and see how far we go next year.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the last game. This was, just all set up for an easy Steelers victory. So, of course, it's Cleveland Browns 48, Pittsburgh Steelers 37.
That's why we play the game. It's why they play the games. And I think I don't think there's any solace for Steelers fans or for Ben Roethlisberger that he's got the completion record in this game and lost the way that they did. 47 completions is an NFL record. 68 attempts, and that's going to help you do it. But from that kind of snap going over Roethlisberger's head and the Browns getting a touchdown off it, just 35 points in the first half, they just absolutely came and smashed them. And whether that means that Alex Van Pelt should be calling plays for the Browns or not, I don't know. But this was certainly not what everybody had predicted, and I'm kind of glad this was this was. As much as I don't like the Browns because they're in the same division as the Ravens or the Steelers for that matter, it was, I'm quite glad that this was the way that the Browns game played out.
So I thought this was one of those, it was a bit of a weird game because I watched this back. I didn't watch it live, work and everything, so I watched it last night in full. This is one of those games where everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong for the Steelers in the opening 10 minutes. And it completely changed the game. Obviously, they were down by so much that it was pretty much impossible for them to come back from it. I mean, it was 28-0 by the end of the first quarter. So I think this is the Browns Super Bowl.
The worst games that you lose are not the games that you lose in a last-second field goal. They're the games that you lose in the first quarter because you just didn't start the game right. And that's what happened to the Steelers here. Through the second, third, and fourth quarters, they win this game, but they just they just did not start the game in any sort of fashion that you would accept as a professional football franchise, and they paid the price for it. So, as much as it's pleasing to see it happen, I don't think Browns fans should take too much of it because the slow start from the Steelers pretty much ruined any other opportunity that they had for this game.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the first two scores are what cost the Steelers here, and they were both Pittsburgh errors. You had the snap, which was very, very Brit ball, very, very Brit ball, over the head of Ben Roethlisberger into the end zone, instantly a touchdown. And then you had the interception from Roethlisberger, which then leads to the Landry touchdown. So you take those two scores off, it's 34-37 to the Steelers. Now, I know that's just hindsight being 2020. You can't really do that because the game would be different in a whole load of other ways. But I'm just saying, you can say that those two mistakes were what cost the Steelers on this and were what, in the end, handed the Browns the victory.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're pretty settled on that. But pre-season, we questioned whether Stephen Stefanski would be able to get this Browns team to do what he wanted. And we questioned whether Baker was the right guy for that. And through 2-3 games of the season, it seemed as though we were kind of, we were going to be correct about that. But fair play to them. They went away. They sorted out what they were good at and kind of, slowed everything down and just said, we're going to focus on, these, the basic fundamentals of our offense. And they've built on it from there. And when they execute, they're very good, the Browns. Steelers very good defense, number one defense for a long period of the season. And they're no slouches on defense. But the Browns offense has been really cool to watch them progress from really struggling in the early parts of the season to now getting to what we talk about Kirk Cousins stat lines for kind of this kind of Kubiak, Stefanski wide zone Shanahan scheme. And getting 300 yards, 3 touchdowns when they're playing really well and getting 100 yards on the ground. So they've got the talent. It's going to be a difficult game for them. And I would like to see them do well. And if they get a little bit of a lead next week, it'll be very, very interesting because they've got the type of offense that can sustain a lead like we've seen in this game. But it's about the consistency, and I'm just worried. I'm just going to be interested to see how the first quarter plays out against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I suppose the last thing that we should touch on, potential that this was Big Ben's last game. He said that he's going to take some time to consider it. I think he just wants the media attention and he'll be back next year. But it could be the end. This could be the last of that draft class. Eli, Rivers, Big Ben, all gone.
I think he'll have one more go. And I think they will perhaps look more significantly at bringing in the proper replacement. Because, they took Rudolph in the second round, but that's obviously not been it. I could see the Steelers taking a, Jordan Love-esque pick, towards the bottom half of the first round next year, or perhaps trading for an interesting young prospect that's already had some game time, that's maybe proven that they've got the traits that can succeed in the league. But I think he's played well this year again, much like Breeze, not like the kind of Big Ben that we've seen in previous years, but certainly very, very good Ben at points in the season. 500 yards in a playoff game, all right, 4 TDs, okay, there's 4 interceptions and that cost them, but again, he was having to throw the ball, 68 times. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers probably do get him back. I think they change up how they run the ball, because that was the main problem for their offense this year. And despite it being a passing league, you still need to be able to run the ball. And they've really struggled. They've really struggled this year as part of that. So they're not far away. They get a run game. They'll be back in the playoffs next year, and I think they'll be with Big Ben.
Yeah.
Cue him retiring tomorrow.
Potential landing spot for Darnold or Kyle Trask. Those are my predictions. Way too early predictions. Let us go to the Dirty Divisional round, Dan.
TM, trademark pending.
Yes. We open on Saturday with the Los Angeles Rams at the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay are favoured by 7 points. The over-under on this is 46. What are you thinking here? Packers are -7. They're right. 7-point favourites.
Cold weather. You can't go with golf in a cold weather game. So that's the first starting point for any thought process about this.
You can't go with golf in any big game.
Well, you say big game, I just say cold weather game. I think he's kind of like 0-4 in anything outside, and the temperature's been sub 40 in the kind of the American terms. So it really, really does affect him. He's a California guy. He's used to the heat. He doesn't do well in the cold, and that is a real factor for some players and a consideration. So MVP level, Aaron Rodgers. Despite there is a real strength v strength, really, really, really good offense against a really, really, really good defense. It'll be interesting to see whether they put Aaron Rodgers on the move a little bit to try and avoid Aaron Donald rather than straight back drop backs. Now we all know that Aaron Rodgers likes to get the ball out quick. Through that McCarthy era, there was a lot of those very, very quick kind of screens to number 3 and a lot of stick and a lot of quick slants. And he can get the ball out quick. He's got that release. But the vast majority of the Packers kind of, plays have been a little bit kind of slower developing, allowing to get downfield. And again, Devontae Adams versus Jalen Ramsey. There's just so many kind of good matchups and little mini stories within this game. It'll be interesting to see. But -7, I think it's just a little bit of a big number. And I think, depending on the Rams' run game, I'm edging towards that. I'm edging more towards them taking the Rams in the +7. I think Green Bay win. No, I flip-flopped. It's happened all of 3 seconds. I'm going to take the Packers -7.
I do not trust Jared Goff. I think he is going to turtle in this big game terribly. But I just think that defense keeps it close. I do think that -7 is too big a number in this one. You're going to have to rely more on your rushing attack if you're Green Bay, because I just think Jalen Ramsey is going to do such a good job on Smith on the outside. So
Aaron Jones is the type of back that'll do that. I mean, a lot of the kind of mid-season talk about the Packers offense was essentially how they used Aaron Jones as essentially a receiver. and the way that they got him out the backfield, or they motioned him to kind of, almost kind of H-back positions and run him on seams and such the like. So that might be the matchup that they look to exploit. Aaron Jones on linebackers rather than, trying to force the ball to Devontae Adams against Ramsey and, getting themselves into trouble. To me, this is much like we kind of talked about previously. I think this is about the first quarter. I think if the Packers come away with 10 points on the first 2 or 3 drives and the Rams get nothing, and their offense is stuttering because they can't run the ball, they can't get Goff up and running, regardless of the script, I think that's when the Rams are going to be in trouble. The Rams need to keep this to less than a touchdown for the majority of the game to even give themselves a chance. The minute they allow the Packers to open up a lead, I think that's it done.
I agree, and I also think that Goff is on a short leash again.
Is Wofford going to be clear to come back?
Well, no, but they'll actually have Bortles activated.
Oh yeah, because that's excellent. That's
Well, no, but I'm just saying that last week, if they had actually gone with the 3 QBs active for that game, there's no way that they would have kept Jared Goff in there. Troy Aikman could barely hide his disdain for how poorly Jared Goff plays.
But still, I know it's the boat, but still, come on now.
I'm not saying that he's going to win it for them, but I'm just saying that they will make changes. It's a kitchen sink game. You're going to throw everything at them, which is why I think the 7 line is too high. I think Green Bay win it, but I just think that line's too high.
I think that's where I started going, but I flip-flopped. I couldn't do it. Aaron Rodgers, I'm willing to take him at a touchdown. And of course, they've screwed me over every point of the season. You'd think I'd learn, but nope, unfortunately. Nice little nugget is that Jared Veldier is going to be playing in 2 back-to-back playoff games for different teams, first time in NFL history, which I think is it's a great thing to happen, and B, I think it's really, really clever of the Packers. To do that. For anyone that's not aware, Jared Veldier was playing tackle for the Colts, but he was a practice squad guy. In fact, he retired, I think, last season, was kind of brought back as an emergency player, and he was sitting on the Colts practice squad, and due to this year's rules, they managed to elevate him for the game. But because he was on the practice squad, that meant that the Packers could then sign him. He wasn't on the actual active roster, so it looks as though he's going to get some game time for the Packers, which I think is clever from the Packers, because they've got difficulties at tackle. They've got some injuries. Bakhtiari's out, and so they're going to need some depth. So good thinking by the Packers.
Do you want a further nugget on him?
Well, always.
Do you know why he came back to play?
Massive crippling debt.
He was missing football as an offensive line coach in high school. So he was coaching football, but that fix wasn't enough football for him, so he decided to come back out and play football.
Yeah,
which is just brilliant. just saying it to the wife, like, I just really miss football. Like, what the fuck have you been doing? Like all these, all this other time.
I think there's football, and then there's football.
Yeah, no, you don't understand. It's football.
Yeah,
that's what I'm missing. Let's go on to the other Saturday night game. You going to stay up for this one? I assume you are.
Certainly going to try. No, I'm not going to try. I am.
Oh, God, how I envy you in your child-free life. Baltimore at Buffalo. Buffalo are favoured by 3 points. The over-under on this is 50 points. Dan, I'll give you the honours first, because I think we will disagree on this one.
Yeah, because you've been stroking fucking Bills Mafia all season, and unnecessarily. I mean, let's be fair to Buffalo. They've done well. They've managed to shake off, the image that everybody has had of Buffalo, and it's been coming for a little bit of time, but they've actually managed to fulfill that promise now. But let's be honest, they, were lucky to get out of that, that game last week. False sense of confidence. Baltimore are a proper defense, potentially better than what the Colts have been giving them, and they are going to run the ball down a poor run defense in the Bills' defense. So, I could be a total homer, which I'm sounding like very much just now, but the idea that the Bills should be favoured here by ±3 is only because they're the home team. That's the standard, that's the standard amount that you'd get. But quite frankly, this is a pick 'em at minimum, and even then, I think Baltimore should be favoured slightly. So Baltimore, the cold weather game, it's not going to affect Baltimore. They play in cold weather, so I just think Baltimore are the better team right now and the more dynamic team. And Bills passing game. Ravens got a good secondary. I guess, as I say, they're built to kind of beat the Chiefs, and so we've now got Chiefs light or Weight Watchers Chiefs in the Buffalo Bills, and I think Baltimore are just the better team.
I'm going with the Bills because I'm going to continue my love with Bills Mafia.
Right, if the Bills lose, I get to put you through a table. COVID guidelines permitting.
Yes, COVID guidelines permitting. No, so you've got the fifth best passing attack in the NFL, and the Bills coming, and Josh Allen. I do not trust the Baltimore corners.
Well, then you're a fool, but go on. Explain why.
Peterson. Marcus Peters.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he can get got. And I think they're going to just try and exploit him as much as possible. I really like the way that the Bills use Cole Beasley in the slot. I think that will give you more issues.
Okay, wait, just before we step off of Cole Beasley, search for Seth Galina on Twitter and find all the routes that Cole Beasley ran on Saturday.
Oh, I can find it on NFL Next Gen.
Well, no. He runs one route. He runs an option route from the slot every single time. It's brilliant. But yes, no, he's an outlet. He's essentially just a kind of check down for Allen. But yes, anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
Yeah, I think that's going to give Baltimore problems. I think where the Bills struggle is their rushing attack. Unless they use Josh Allen a lot more in it, and I don't think that's something that you want to be overly reliant on in this game, because you still are going to need to use them throwing to try and get you through this. I just think that's the one thing that I'm worried about, is they have no rushing attack, so they are pretty one-dimensional. I just like their one dimension on this Baltimore team. Now, conversely, what you've said is absolutely correct. The Ravens' rushing attack is absolute poison to this Bills defense. So I think what both teams are good at, strangely, is what the defense's weaknesses.
I mean, if anything, I'm more worried about Marlon Humphrey being targeted in pass coverage, and if they, have to make him travel with Diggs, I think that's a problem. But we'll see how the beginning of the game starts out. But I just can see Baltimore really doing some damage and really kind of wearing down this Buffalo team with long drives that end in touchdowns. And they're not going to do it through the air, as far as I'm concerned. They might take a couple shots, but that's not what Baltimore do generally. And so I think Lamar Jackson again will have himself a day. And I am blinkered most probably, but I can see that Diggs could give us difficulty. But I think it's all on Diggs, quite frankly. If we let Diggs have a game like he did in Week 16, and go off for almost 200 yards, obviously that's going to be difficult for any team. But if we allow him and Allen to get into any sort of rhythm, then we're going to be kind of inviting our trouble on ourselves. So it's going to be, I think they'll play a lot more man. I think we'll send a lot more blitz pressure at Allen to try and to get him off balance and to get him kind of rolling out the pocket. And if I think you'd be right, I think it would be better to use Allen in the run game, because they used to do that a lot between the 20s, generally 2 years prior to this year. And they've essentially decided to stop that and make him kind of throw in between that. And then when they get down to the red zone, they use him a little bit more in the run game. Hence why they were able to get away with that absolutely ridiculous kind of, run, and then the tight end just, knocks leaked out and was just available in the end zone on against the Colts. So I think it's probably actually the best matchup of all the games next week.
Yeah, I think it's also one where you've got both teams coming in with confidence, which I like. I think Baltimore come in, they got that monkey off their back, and they got that playoff win that, like we said at the top of the show, it killed the narrative around Lamar. Buffalo, it wasn't an emphatic win by any means. They did have to hold on at the end to kind of get through it. But it's the first playoff win that franchise has had, again, since 1995. Confidence is going to be high going in there. To go back to your point, actually, just on pressuring Josh Allen. So he's had 233 pressured dropbacks. He's attempted 190 passes, completed 94 of them. So he is pretty good under pressure.
That's a third.
Yeah. But that's still up there.
Sorry, I was trying to listen to as you're doing it, but you're saying 290 pressures.
He's had 233 pressures.
230 pressures, and 96 completions on those pressures. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, from that, he's had 190 attempts and 94 completions.
Yeah. So
he's still done. He's been pretty efficient under that. I'd say he's kind of, he's pretty much middle of the road there. He's not elite, he's not terrible, but he can be had. I just think that if you are going to leave your cornerbacks one-on-one playing man there, that's a risk.
That's why I'm not a defensive coordinator in the NFL, Calum. But that's what I think we'll see. I think we'll see that. I think we'll see quite a bit of man to try and to not let Diggs run riot, and just to sit away and allow them to put bombs into because one of the things that Allen's done is that he's increased his completion percentage by about 16 points. I think he's gone from worst to kind of second. That's the biggest 1 year jump on record. And we talked to preseason about Allen's deep ball accuracy, and he's increased that by again 20 percentage points. So they've done really, really well in improving Josh Allen and Brian Daboll, but how the Baltimore defense, play it, I think pressuring Allen earlier rather than waiting for a third down is the way to go. So I would like to see a little bit more kind of
get them behind the chains early.
Yeah,
I actually think what really impressed me about the Baltimore defense on Sunday against the Titans was the way that Wink Martindale was confusing Tannehill with the different lineups in the fronts, and just making them change how their blocking assignments were based on those alignments, when it turned out that wasn't the way they were lining up anyway, or where they were attacking. I think if you do that to Josh Allen isn't sophisticated enough to, in my opinion, to figure out what's going on. I think if you stick with that same kind of Tennessee game plan in that regard, you could have a lot of success as well.
You got to remember that half the battle with that, it was trying to also help defend against the run. So it was trying to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah,
we don't necessarily have to do that against Buffalo, but I understand what you're saying about trying to mess with the protections and get going that way. Anyway, fascinating matchup. I'm really excited, and yes, I will be staying up to watch it.
Okay, I think I'll put you down as Baltimore on this one.
Just a tad.
Yeah, just a tad. And I take it you're going for them straight up as well to progress.
Yes.
Yeah, but I definitely think this is the game of the week. So I'm all in on this one. I can't wait to rewatch it on Sunday. Sans child. Cleveland at Kansas City. Kansas City are 10-point favourites, and the over-under here is 56. I like Cleveland against the spread. I still think Kansas City win this one.
Yeah, no, I think we talked a long time about Baltimore. I'm sorry for everyone that wants us to kind of talk a lot about Cleveland and Kansas City, but we are going to have to run short of time. But bottom line is that Kansas City haven't blown teams out of the water this year. Cleveland have got the offense and the momentum to try and keep it close, and so I think +10 Cleveland is the way to go.
Yeah, and look, Stefanski's back. There is a chance for Cleveland. The argument for Cleveland here is that they can control the clock with the running game. They have some weapons on defense. You've got Myles Garrett. Ward is a pretty good corner that you can match up against Hill. I don't think they have enough, but I wouldn't be overly shocked if they win it just by playing clock management football. If Cleveland realise that they're playing Kansas City and the clock and do it that way, then there is a path to victory for them. I just don't think it's
pick them outright. Do it. Pick them outright. Do it.
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm still taking Kansas City. Cleveland spread Kansas City.
All right.
And I think we're aligned on that one.
I am the same, but God, I would love it if the AFC Championship game was Baltimore Cleveland. That would just be awesome. But anyway.
Last game, Tampa Bay at New Orleans. New Orleans are favoured by 3 points.
The old bowl.
Yeah, the old bowl. And the total for this one is 51 points. New Orleans have won the previous 2 meetings. I'm taking Tampa Bay.
Straight up?
Yeah, straight up.
Right, we'll disagree. I'm going to go with New Orleans.
I just don't think there's any way that Brady gets swept 3 times.
No, and it's very rare that that's happened. And the more times you play a team, the more comfortable you get, and if they're required to, maybe have to change their plan too much, so they can do things that they're not totally familiar with. So I can understand that. But again, just the more rounded team, I think, is New Orleans. Not by much at all. I'm not saying that, I think it's, only a little bit, and it's more on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Tampa Bay have the offensive weapons, but so did New Orleans. New Orleans at home. Yeah, no, I got to stick with New Orleans. I said NFC Championship game for the New Orleans preseason, and I think I know a lot of things happened, 17 weeks, 18 weeks have happened in between that, but I think I'm going to stick with New Orleans on this one.
We've been going all season about how the sky is falling in on Brady, and then you just look back at it and look at how the season's happened, and it's not the case. He's been really efficient. I think he's just, as the weeks have gone on, he's gotten more and more comfortable in this offense. And the defense are playing well. I really like how Tampa have started to round into form. They played New Orleans. They last played New Orleans in week 9. They're a completely different team.
No, I
matchup.
I can get on board with Tampa being a different type of offense from week 9. I truly can. I can't. I don't know if it's my Brady bias, kicking in. But let's put it this way: I'm not going to be raging if New Orleans don't win this. But I'm willing to go with Sean Payton really, rather than Tom Brady.
No, and this is going to be one of those matchups that's very close. I think it's going to come down to the wire. That's why part of me is almost like, I don't know why I'm going. Well, I do know why I'm going with Tampa Bay. I do think they are going to win this one, but it's such a tight matchup, and it's going to be on fine margins on this. A turnover will definitely swing this game.
Yeah, I do think it's Drew Brees throwing that turnover because you hate Drew Brees.
I don't hate Drew Brees.
You do. You severely dislike the way that he's playing this year.
I don't think he's been great, but I really admire the way that Sean Payton has performed this year as coach. I wrote an article for Gridiron Hub that is out now for you listeners on the 4 coaches of the year candidates and who I think is coach of the year, and Sean Payton was on my list. He's taken a gunner and won 4 games with him, and the limited amount that Brees is able to help in the passing game, look how much he's evolved this offense. It's all based on the short and intermediate throws and the game of Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. So he's done a fantastic job. But I don't know. There's just something about Brady in the playoffs that I don't want to pick against him.
I picked against Brady. Well, I suppose the comfort you should take, Calum, is that I've picked against Brady in the playoffs every single year for about the last 20 years.
Yes.
And who's won that?
Yeah. It's kind of like a dog with a shock collar. You and Brady.
Pretty much.
Is there anything? Yes.
Yeah, just quickly. Dan Quinn is now the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator. What happened in the meantime is that obviously Mike Nolan got fired around about a week ago, and they interviewed all of one person, which was Dan Quinn, and so they've hired him. And so it's quite clear that what they've done is they've just gone back. They've gone back to kind of the Chris Richard model that they had when the Dallas defense was, essentially just they were doing well 2 years ago. And so obviously they got rid of him, brought in Mike Nolan, and they've just said, no, we're going to go back to that. So back to that middle high Seattle defense that they've kind of running for 2-3 years before Mike McCarthy got hired, and it's very, very transparent, and that's what they're doing. But then again, so are the Oakland Raiders. They've just hired Gus Bradley, so the Seattle Seahawks defense is not dead in the NFL.
Yes, it's coming back. It's just filtering down and becoming less successful with each
with every season.
Yeah. I did see that Dak Prescott's brother tweeted out and then deleted that he had told Dak not to go back to the Cowboys this year. So things are going well with the Texas-based franchises.
I've got a funny feeling when he's paid $100 million plus, he'll be quite happy to go back to the Cowboys.
You would think so. But stranger things have happened. And I'm not holding out any. I've given up predicting what is going to happen in the NFL now. Apart from next year when we'll do it again.
I was about to say, what the hell will we be doing?
Yeah. I've given up being surprised by the NFL.
Well, we've got a COVID year. This is a mulligan year. We're just getting into the swing of things again.
Exactly. This is our pre-season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and on that, we will be back next week to review the Dirty Divisional round and preview Championship Sunday.
Whatever, just end it now.
Yeah, okay. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we will be back next week. Goodbye.